Morning, my friends. Fear and trembling. Let's talk about it. Jesus, coffee. Yay. Hot coffee. Ooh, good night. So, yeah, I didn't do a video yesterday. Um, we're walking through some stuff. And I'm sorry I didn't do a video yesterday. I was going to do one last night on my way to church. And God had another plan. I had a friend, an acquaintance that was in need, and they needed to talk and they needed some counsel. So they reached out and gave them counsel. So it came to the cost of not doing a video. So then I go to church and talk to a friend of mine last night, a brother in Christ, and he asked how things were going, and I shared with him that you'll see how the story all unfolds. Shared with him that I was just walking through the reality of a very gripping fear that I'm not choosing to face. And it's coming at the expense of my relationship with my kids. And that gripping fear is a fear of rejection. Well, if you don't reach out to them, you can't get rejected. You can't get told, we don't want to be a part of your life. And so you see how it's a very ugly circle, very ugly cycle. So, and as I sit there and share that with him, we get into the message and we go through worship and great worship set, and we sit and listen to the message. He came down and sat next to me because he's actually playing guitar last night. So he comes down and sits next to me, and we're listening to the message. And well, I told you we're going through a 5-week series on 2 verses. We're going through a series called Resolute on 2 verses, and those 2 verses are 1 Corinthians 16 verses 13 and 14. Be on the alert, stand firm in the faith, act like men, and be strong. Let all that you do be done in love. Good morning, Linda. Good to be seen, my friend. Good to be seen. Good to see you. Thank you for being here. So I get through telling him about that, and I had shared with him that, at times I feel like I'm dealing with spiritual immaturity. And because Christian Family Chapel has, they walk through their maturity in stages. They have 4 phases, from being in the tomb, or being in the grave, or the coffin, right, being spiritually dead, to when we come out of when we're born again, we become infants. We're in the crib. And we move from the crib, as we grow up and mature, we move from the crib to the table, where we begin to feed each other, help feed each other, and feed ourselves. Right? When you're at the table, you can hand food to other people, and you're also feeding yourself. When you're in the crib, you can't feed yourself. You are completely a consumer. You're dependent on everybody else feeding you, right? Giving you the food that you need, being on milk. So you move to the table, and you can begin to help feed others, and you can feed yourself. Right? Then you move to the stove. And at the stove, you're helping to feed everybody. You're helping to bring nourishment even to those who are in the coffin. But you can feed the babes that are in the crib. You can feed those that are at the table. You are multiplying, in essence. You are becoming a multiplier when you're at the stove. So I said, there's times I feel like I'm still in the crib. And hard comment to make, but just a reality. Right? Because you look at some of the attributes of those who are childish, who display a childish immaturity. And the message, the part of the verse we were focusing on last night was act like men. Now it doesn't mean act like men. It means, I'm going to go back and give you context really in what Paul's talking about in 1 Corinthians 3 verses 1 through 3. He's actually talking about maturity. And I, brethren, could not speak to you as to spiritual men, but as to men of flesh, as to infants in Christ. I gave you milk to drink, not solid food, for you were not able to receive it. Indeed, even now you are not yet able. For you are still fleshly. For since there is jealousy and strife among you, are you not fleshly? Are you not walking like mere men? So you see what he's talking about there is spiritual maturity, right? This is a young church. This is a church that's only 6 years old and still some immaturity in there, right? You hear what he said. You're still not able to receive meat, right? Meaning solid sustenance. You're still dealing with milk. And I'm 7 years into my walk, so I'm really not any older than the church at Corinth was after Paul had established it spiritually. Still have my days where I'm in the crib. When you look at attributes of being childish, childish immaturity, you talk about selfishness, impulsiveness, jealousy, lying, impatient. And then Pastor Rod Doug had actually left a sixth blank that I didn't fill out because I wanted to take a little introspective look to be able to fill that out. So he talks about being courageous. And when we're spiritually mature, those childish attributes become different attributes. And that's as we progress through our Christian walk, right? Selfishness goes to loving others, right? Because when you're selfish, you're all about loving yourself. Selfish, right? Now you're focusing on loving others. When you're impulsive, being the mature option, the mature attribute of being impulsive is to be self-controlled. Jealousy, right? The mature attribute that stems from jealousy, that comes from jealousy, is contentment, right? Now you're no longer jealous of what somebody has, you're content in what you have, right? Impatience, patience, long suffering, right? I don't do that very well. I'm not very patient. It's a call to courage is really what it's called to. What he's calling here is calling them to courage, calling them to act like men, to grow up, not act like men, but to become mature, right? So ladies, don't hear that this is all about men. This is a message focused on men. It's not. Maturity is maturity, right? C.S. Lewis talks about our talks about courage. And he talks about how courage is not simply one of the virtues, but it's the form of every virtue at its testing point. What he means by that is every virtue that we have, patience, selfishness, love, forgiveness, kindness, gentleness, every one of those virtues is there, but is it present at its testing point? And he talks about Pontius Pilate, right? How Pontius Pilate was very, very merciful. Until it became dangerous. He sat out there and he said, I find no fault with this man. Why do you want to crucify him? I find no fault with him. He wanted to release him until the Jews started to become unruly. And the minute that it started to look like it wasn't going to go so well for Pilate, that courage crumbled. That mercy crumbled. He wasn't so merciful when it looked like it wasn't going to go so well for him. So what does that look like for us? Because I'll tell you right now, I don't display courage. I have this gripping fear. I don't want to reach out to my kids because I don't want to get told we don't want to be part of you. We don't want you in our life. I don't want to hear that. My ego can't handle that. My pride can't handle that. And that's hard. And that hurts. Just be in full disclosure. So I talked to Leah this morning. And Leah's like, where's the fear? Where's the fear of rejection? You've already been rejected. You've already faced it. And I just laid there. I'd gotten up and thought about all of this. And it's flipping cold. You guys up north need to come get your weather. It's definitely around here lost. I went and climbed back in bed and got warm and sat there and talked to Leah as she got ready for work. And that just kind of penetrated my heart. I laid there in tears I walked out of church in tears last night. At talking about something and God knowing it, and then what's he do? Here you go. I heard you. And this is exactly. And he talks about in Philippians 2, and I want to go into this passage because I love this passage, and this is really the core of the passage. This was the core of the teaching. So then, my beloved, just as you have also obeyed, not as in my presence only, but now much more in my absence, work out your salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God who is at work in you, both to will and to work for his good pleasure. So this comes down to your salvation, right? How do we work out our salvation? Well, when you have your salvation, you have to work it out. Now, Paul came to them in much fear and trembling. He came in weakness and in fear and in much trembling. But 1 Corinthians 2:3 talks about how he was with them. So he displayed the courage to be with them while he was in fear, weakness and fear and much trembling. He was still with them. Bottom line, are you going to work out whatever that is? Fill in the blank. Whatever that is, work it out with fear and trembling. Work out your salvation in fear and trembling. With fear and trembling. So put a line in there. Work out whatever with fear and trembling. Why? For it is God who is at work in you, both to will and to work for his good pleasure. So it's not you. It's going to take your courage to step in to whatever it is that you are fearful of, that causes you fear and trembling. You have to step into that. Why? Because it's God at work in you. You know, 1 Corinthians 2:3, Paul was with them, which took courage. Because had he just shrunk back in fear, he wouldn't have gone to them. But he came to them in weakness and in fear and in much trembling. So there are some things that I have to work out in fear and trembling. Why? Because I can't keep shrinking back. I can't keep doing the things that... Because when we just sit in fear, right? You guys have heard me say, fear, false evidence appearing real. That's the easy answer, right? That's the answer. Then there's the response of that is moreover the one that I've done for years of my life, which is forget everything and run. That's what this chicken's done. Gawk! Chicken. Because I have forgot everything and run. It's what I'm really good at, is forgetting everything and running. Well, now it's time to face that with fear and trembling. Why? Because it's God who's at work in me. Step in. That's all I'm saying. Step in with fear and trembling and work it out. Why? Because it's God who's at work in you. I love you guys. He loves you like crazy. So we'll be back Monday with whatever Dad wants to talk about. Work it all out in fear and trembling. And I'll post some of that stuff down in the comments so you can see it. I love you guys.